Hi everybody, Rick Morrison here with Bailey's Chapel and Ellerville United Methodist Churches. I am here at the soon-to-be opening Quabain Children's Museum in High Point, North Carolina, and I'm here for a very specific reason, and it has to do with dinosaurs. And I've got a dinosaur right next to me, and I'm glad you could join us today. Feel free to join us every week and keep watching Into the World with God, our video series. I'm beginning to talk about the Gospel of John today, and this is the first of the series that I'll be continuing through Easter on the Gospel of John. But the question I had for you this morning is, do you believe in dinosaurs? Do you believe in dinosaurs? I suspect that you do. I would venture to say that all of us believe in dinosaurs, like this one that's plastic recreation that's standing right next to me, but why do you believe in them? Have you ever seen a real one in the flesh? And the answer is, of course, no, you have not. They are dinosaurs. They lived millions of years ago. Now, some would tell you that I'm a living dinosaur, but don't fall for that. Have you ever seen anything that's other than a plastic recreation of a dinosaur? No, none of us have. Have you ever held a real dinosaur bone in your hand? And the answer is probably no, you have not, because those are things that are kept under glass and in vacuum sealed compartments because they don't want them to deteriorate or degrade over time, and we want to keep them for posterity. So it's not likely that any of us have ever seen a real and held a real dinosaur bone. But in order to believe in dinosaurs, we have to rely upon the testimony of others, scientists, archaeologists, who have carefully investigated and examined the evidence, who have examined with their own hands and touched and seen with their own eyes the physical proof that dinosaurs existed at one point in time. We have to rely upon the tools of carbon dating and science in order to have a testimony that we can trust. Testimony from someone who has actually seen the proof and experienced it for themselves. Now, I would venture to say to you that in much the same fashion, the stories of our faith, we have to rely upon the testimony of others. We read the testimonials, the four Gospels of our New Testament, written by those who were with Jesus a couple thousand years ago, and thank God they wrote their thoughts down. If you were tasked with writing a testimony of your own of the good news of Jesus, what would you say? How would you tell his story to others? And then why would you want to tell such a story to others? What would be your motivation in writing it? Luke simply said in his gospel, there are so many stories floating around about Jesus out there, and I just thought it would be a good idea to write down what I've heard and what I've discovered and checked out on my own. Luke just thought it would be a good idea. Where would you start in writing a testimony? The four gospel stories all begin at different points. Would you begin with the story of Mary being visited by an angel? Or would you begin with John the Baptist crying out in the wilderness, "Prepare ye the way of the Lord"? Or would you begin with Jesus walking up to John by the Jordan River and asking to be baptized? Or would you begin with the historical lineage of Jesus' family tree? Or would you begin with your own personal testimony of your experience with Jesus as the Son of God, detailing how a relationship with him has changed your life in so many definitive ways? What is your testimony about Jesus? Who do you say that he is? The Gospel of John is quite different from the other three Gospels, and the other ones are known collectively as the Synoptic Gospels, or similar viewpoint versions of the good news. John's writing is much different. It's highly imaginative, it is flamboyant, it's symbolic, It's not necessarily according to a timeline of the others, and it's filled with metaphors and symbolism. And I would add that John's historic cultural setting was much different from the other gospel writers at all, because John was written between 20 and 30 years after the other gospels, and perhaps 40 to 50 years after the death of Jesus. All the other gospel writers were long gone by this point in time, and John was the only one left. He was the old man, if you will, or the dinosaur, remembering what happened so very long ago. He was pretty much in retirement, not out starting churches, not out carrying the gospel to all the ends of the earth as Jesus had commanded them to do. John's gospel is more of a reflection of a life of obedience to Christ, one that he lived. And it was written by someone who was intensely grateful for having the opportunity to see and to know Jesus intimately. You'll remember that John was the one, in his own words, the disciple that Jesus loved. Another good question about your testimony is, why write it down in the first place? What would motivate you for such a writing? What would you want your gospel or good news to accomplish? What purpose would you now have? What purpose do you now have whenever you share your testimony out and about Jesus? John has one overriding motivation for his writing, and he wants his readers to do this. He wants them to come to know Jesus as he did, as one who is coming from the Father in human form. John was an eyewitness to Jesus coming, and he wants you to believe what is said about Jesus, that he is the Son of God, that he's come to save us, give us eternal life. John simply wants, as we shall see in the coming weeks, for his readers to believe that Jesus is from God. And from now until Easter, I am going to be preaching chapter by chapter through the Gospel of John. This week I'm focusing on chapter number 1. And the title of this series is John's Gospel, Reasons to Believe. Now, near the end of John's writing, he tells us the purpose for doing so. He begins with the story of Thomas demanding of Jesus to see proof that Jesus was in fact risen from the dead, when suddenly Jesus appeared right in the middle of them. John chapter 20, verse 27. Then Jesus said to Thomas, "Put your finger here and see my hands. Reach out your hand and put it into my side. Do not doubt, but believe." And Thomas answered him, "My Lord and my God." And Jesus said to him, "Have you believed because you have seen me? Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have come to believe." In other words, they refused to believe. Thomas refused to believe the testimony of others. He had to see it for himself. And that's the reason Thomas has come to be known in the gospel as, or in church history as being Doubting Thomas, his name. But from Jesus' standpoint, it was not to criticize Thomas, but rather to show the better position of someone who believes in Jesus without needing to see any proof that he is the Son of God. Just a knowing inside that it's true what they say of him. They are more blessed than Thomas because they didn't require any proof. They believed by faith and not by sight. John continues giving the reason for his writing of the gospel. In verse 30, he says, "Now Jesus did many other signs in the presence of the disciples, which were not written in his book, or in this book, John's book. But these are written so that you may come to believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, and that through believing you may have life in his name." That's why John's telling you all of these stories, some of which he doesn't tell. He says there are too many to tell. But he's wanting everyone, including you and me, hundreds and perhaps thousands of years later, to come to believe that Jesus is the anointed one of the Messiah from God. He wants this of all of his readers, to believe where they have not seen for themselves, that they might, no matter what their cultural setting, no matter what their religious background, believe that Jesus, the one they've heard about, is from God and in some way is God. The Roman centurion was standing at the foot of the cross upon Jesus' death, and he simply confessed, surely this was the Son of God. He had just killed him. He was not worthy of that revelation. But not every human being would be able to see Jesus in the flesh and to personally witness his miracles, as Thomas was very blessed to do. How much more, Jesus said, will the multitudes be who simply hear the story and say, yeah, I believe. That's the problem that John is addressing in his gospel. It's been over 40 years since Jesus died and went to heaven, and no one of his readers then could see, hear, feel, or touch Jesus any longer. But that did not negate the power of the story, that he could bring salvation to the world. All they have to do is believe, what they have not yet seen. That is what John wants his readers to do, hear and believe the testimony of one who was there, that Jesus is the Son of God and that he came from God, period. As we shall see, there is something that I have never seen before in this gospel reading or telling, is that every chapter, within every chapter, there is coaching and coaxing that we would believe that Jesus is the Son of God. Every chapter stresses the importance of belief in the equation of salvation. But you only see that when you look at the book, or the writing as a whole, and not just in bits and pieces, and memorize verses as we sometimes read this ever so quotable gospel. John begins what I call his old man's gospel in vivid fashion. John 1:1. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things, yes, even dinosaurs, came into being through him, and without him not one thing came into being. What has come into being in him was life, and the life was the light of all people. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not overcome it. Please notice the analogies and the metaphors that John uses liberally here. Words like word, and life, and light, and darkness. This is much different than the other gospel stories. Obviously, he's not being literal here, he's being symbolic. He continues in what I would call the key verse, beginning in verse 11. He came to what was his own, and his own people did not accept him. But to all who received him, who believed in his name, he gave the power to become children of God, who were born not of blood or of the will of the flesh or of the will of man, but of the will of God. You see the basic irony in John's message, don't you? That the world came into being, all of it, through Jesus. Not one thing was made without him. But they did not know him, and they did not accept him. Remember that in John's present world, there had come to be a great division among the Jews between those who believed that Jesus was the Son of God and those who did not. They were all Jews by birthright, but not all united in their belief that Jesus was the Son of God, for sure. And that is the situation that John is determined to correct by demonstrating the many signs that Jesus showed as having come from the Father himself. With one of the first unusual signs that Jesus gave us, he called Philip and Nathanael to follow him when Jesus was visiting in Galilee. Verse 43 of the first chapter again of John. He found Philip and said to him, "Follow me." Now Philip was from Bethsaida, the city of Andrew and Peter, and Philip found Nathanael and said to him, "We've found him about whom Moses in the law and also the prophets wrote, Jesus, the son of Nazareth. And Nathanael said to him, can anything good come out of Nazareth? Philip said to him, come and see. When Jesus saw Nathanael coming toward him, Jesus said of Nathanael, here is truly an Israelite in whom there is no deceit. And somewhat surprised by Jesus' comment about him, verse 48, Nathanael asked him, where did you get to know me? And Jesus answered, I saw you under the fig tree before Philip called you. And Nathanael replied, Rabbi, you are the Son of God. You're the King of Israel. Now, wow, that was pretty easy. One prophetic vision and Nathanael was completely on board. But do you remember Nathanael's first impression? A Messiah from Nazareth? You've got to be kidding me. No way. And then Jesus refers back to that. He says in verse 50, do you believe because I told you that I saw you under a fig tree? Because you will see greater things than these. In other words, it's okay to believe in Jesus because of the miracles, but better to believe just because you want to. You know, we often criticize the Pharisees of Jesus' day saying, how could they see right in front of them miracles happening right before their eyes and not believe? The born blind beggar who now sees, how could they still not believe? The Pharisees demanded proof that Jesus was from God, but they didn't really want it. Real faith is not about seeing and believing in miracles. Real faith, the kind of faith that pleases God, is about trusting and believing God when you have no earthly reason to do so. When you're down in the foxhole fighting for your life, like the thief on the cross who chose to believe in the man who was dying right beside him. Or the Roman centurion who had just killed Jesus with his own hands, suddenly and profoundly realizing that this man was surely the Son of God. It's only when we feel that compulsion to believe in our heart that we can shed the distractions of our wonderful, challenging lives and direct our attention to our hope to the Creator who knows us by name and who has been drawing us unto Himself all along, waiting for us to believe that He came from God for us. Remember the verse above, John 1:12. But for all who received Him, who believed in His name, He gave the power to become children of God. You know, I've seen so many miracles in my lifetime. I swear to God, I could write a book. I've experienced the grace and the goodness and the provision of God on so many occasions. But the miracles that I have seen are not going to convince anybody unless they want to believe. And don't get me wrong, believing in God for miracles is a good and faithful thing to do. But even better is the preference for believing in God simply because you heard something in His story that just rang true in your heart. Like Philip and Andrew and Peter did, who left everything behind the very moment that Jesus said, "Follow me." That's all they needed. We can do that, but will we do that? Or will we be like the Pharisees of Jesus' day? Will we stand firm, confident in our religious convictions and declarations, and demand further proof when God does something different than what we expected? Where does God draw the line between doubt and faith? Perhaps God is just waiting for each one of us to push all of our chips to the center of the table and say, "I'm all in. Let's go somewhere together, you and me." And what a journey that'll be. Really, a journey of faith, as I often call it, a trip of a lifetime. I do believe in dinosaurs. not because I have seen them for myself, but because I believe in the testimony of others who have more knowledge than I do. Nathaniel and Thomas had to see to believe, and that was okay. But you and I don't have to see Jesus to believe in him. It's so much better in the eyes of heaven to just believe in him because we want to, not because we have to. Faith without proof is truly a more blessed way. My friends, thank you for being with us today. Hope you will come join us again next week. For next week, I want you to read chapter 2 of John's Gospel and just read it several times, perhaps every day, over and over again, and see if something new and afresh doesn't pop into your mind or your spirit each time you do that. Let's have a closing prayer. Gracious God, we thank you that we don't have to see you to believe in you, but that upon seeing you, but upon believing in you, in our mind's eye, we begin to see you. We begin to see that Jesus was not only a prophet and a great teacher and a good man, a good person, faithful person, but he was also in some way from God and is God. What a great revelation that is to all of us, Lord, but we know that that can only be done by faith and not by proof. We thank you for the signs and the miracles you bring, and we ask you to keep bringing them in our lives. But it doesn't change the fact that, God, we believe you because we want to believe you. We trust you because we know you and feel you in our spirits. And we thank you that you have chosen us to hear your wonderful message of liberation and salvation. Thank you for being with us this week. In your name we pray. Amen. Again, friends, thanks for being here today, and we'll see you all again very, very soon. Take care.
I have felt the wind blow, whispering your name. I have seen your tears fall when I watch the rain. And how could I say there is no God when all around creation calls a singing bird, a mighty tree, the vast expanse of open sea? Gazing at a bird in flight, soaring through the air, lying down beneath the stars, I feel your presence there. I love to stand at ocean shore and feel the thundering breakers roar, through golden fields of grain, 'neath endless blue horizons spray. to a river of watering the earth, fragrance of a rose in bloom, a newborn's cry at birth. How could I say there is no God when all around